Would you rather get $100 cash or one Bitcoin?
$100 cash, because I don't really know much about Bitcoin, and I recently heard that the market tanked for Bitcoin, so not really interested in that.
It's still worth around $30,000.
Yeah, I just rather have cash. I feel like it's more tangible, you know?
And this shows you how early we still are. We had Bitcoin ETFs that have passed, but right now those companies that can offer Bitcoin or their ETFs to their clients, not the physical Bitcoin, the companies are backing Bitcoin with the spot ETFs. Make that distinction there. But just because the Bitcoin ETFs have passed, these companies still to train up their employees to be able to offer this to their clients. We are still extremely early. Where's Bitcoin going to go? 100,000, $1 million. We are still early. This video shows you this here. And with that, I'm Sean with the Bitcoin Bros. Getting straight into it, taking a look at the Bitcoin price. At the current time it's recording, we're coming in at 41.5. And what do we see? What do we anticipate? So zooming into the price action, this is Bitcoin on the monthly chart. We came up and hit the technical target that we've been looking at for quite some time. Now, Bitcoin came up back in 2021, hit this $65,000 peak, lowered out, hit a $69,000 peak, came down, had this first initial bounce back up to 48,000. This was the target that we showed you in previous videos. And look what happened. We came and hit this perfectly. And now on the monthly chart, we're getting a red inverse hammer, which is bearish. So we could be seeing some cooling off in the markets over the next few months, but we're still mid to long-term bullish. Short-term could get pretty bearish. So don't sell your stack. Look at any downturns as a buying opportunity. And taking a look at previous highs, why do we know about this technical target? Well, look right here, the 2017 peak. We see that we went up to $20,000, came down, had a bounce back, and look what Bitcoin did. From this bounce back, Bitcoin came back and retested those levels perfectly. Right here for the mid-cycle peak, and then we had a correction. So how low did we go in this correction? Let's pull out our price range. This peak, 13.8K down to the bottom. We had a 72% correction. This was a black swan event. So we won't even look at that. Let's just look at a 50% correction. So we're not looking at this because of the black swan outlier. So that's from the 2017 peak, 2019 bottom. So look here. This was the 2013 peak. Then we came down, came back up here. Look at this was the mid-cycle peak here. When we came back up and hit it, had a reversal, then a blast up to the upside, came back up and kissed those levels perfectly. It's like this happens on clockwork. Bitcoin always comes back up to retest those levels. And this is like an inverse head and shoulders pattern that's playing out with the right shoulder being here. This could be a big cup and handle. We can look at it quite a few different ways. But from this peak to this trough, let's see what that pullback was there. We was looking at roughly a 40% correction before we went up and off to the races. Look at, once we hit this peak, look, 1-2 months before we seen the reversal. Looking back before, we had quite a few months before we seen that reversal because we got overbought extremely early in that 2019 bear market. So zooming out on the price action, we see that we have from this peak here, from this trough, from this peak here to this trough, and now the next question is, how low are we going to go from here? The previous two, when it went up 40% and 53%. So what would that look like if we had a 40% correction? And is that realistic? 40% would take us all the way down to 29,000. So could that be in the cards for Bitcoin? Technically, it could. Like, this would scare a lot of people. This would definitely scare a lot of people. 53% would take it even lower, and actually the price action would break. So we don't think that's realistic, 22.5. But could 40% happen? Could this have a pullback and still put in a higher low and a continuation to the upside? This ultimately could play out. If we draw this out for you, it looks like this. It would come up and come all the way back down, all the way down to 30,000, 20,000, 29,000. It might grind up a little bit and ultimately come back up. And look at this. What does this look like? This is like a shoulder ahead. This could be the right shoulder. So this is definitely a bullish pattern if we see this. Technical target breakout, we've showed you the upside targets, but right now, how low will we go? Nobody can anticipate, nobody can know. But if we zoom into this price action right here, this macro green support line, zooming out once again, that's from this bottom here. We wicked down to it once, sat on it twice. Could we come down to it for a third time on this pullback? Or, zoom into this price action, are we going to see just a stair step up from this white line? So are we going to see a $35,000 Bitcoin before we continue to get squeezed into this apex, or are we going to break this and see lower price action? Time is of the essence, and time will tell, but it looks like over the next month or two, we could be getting 2 red months going into the halving. The halving happens, and then you know what time it is after the halving. Blast up and to the right. Stock Money Lizards is showing you this as well. The halving is here. Every single cycle, you see that we have a cool off after the halving, before the halving. So are we going to have this before the halving, or are we going to trade sideways, wait till after the halving and have a pullback? But after the halving, what happens? Up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right. So we have some time. So be patient. Patience is key. Always look at these as buying opportunities. But one thing that did happen recently, the S&P is making new all-time highs right here. And every time the S&P has did this historically, what has Bitcoin done? S&P seems to be acting as a leading indicator historically. Every single time it makes new all-time high, Bitcoin then follows to make new all-time highs. Every single time, Bitcoin makes new all-time highs. Every single time, right here, you had the bear market, but then also ultimately ended up putting in new highs as well. So S&P making a new all-time high is nothing out the norm of what it's did historically. And without further ado, let's hear from Mark Yusko, a Bitcoin and crypto guru, and see what he has to say. Let's check it out from Mark.
Owning little b Bitcoin, the token, that's important, right? Why is it important? Well, it's important to people who believe in self-sovereignty and self-custody. Okay, but the average person in the boomer class who isn't technologically savvy, who hasn't done the work, who doesn't understand why this asset's so important, doesn't understand why triple entry accounting is an important innovation, just isn't going to go there. They're not going to memorize a 24-word seed phrase. They're not going to buy a little ledger and hold their own keys. So CeFi, this intermediate step, is necessary. It's why companies like Coinbase and Kraken are so valuable. So if we think about that as this is an interim step for longer term full adoption, it's kind of a cop-out to say, well, you needed Wall Street in order to get mass adoption. It's one piece of adoption. There's still 3 billion people in the world that don't have electricity. So let's work on getting them adoption. It certainly will reduce volatility, but that's the nature of growing up, right? It's the law of large numbers. When Bitcoin was very small and basically a science project, I mean, 15 years ago when Hal Finney, 15 years ago yesterday, when Hal Finney, did the basic tweet running Bitcoin, the price was 0.00013 or something like that. I mean, the price was zero. And any movement was incredible volatility, just the law of small numbers. And then volatility was really high, and that was great. When it went from $1 to $10, that was a miracle, right? That was the miracle that we got to a real number that people could actually be attracted to and buy was the miracle. Whether we go from $1,000 to $10,000 or $10,000 to $100,000 or $100,000 to $1 million, that's not the miracle, right? Because those are smaller percentage increases than that original increase from 0.0001 cent to $10. And so, yes, volatility will trend down, as do all assets as they grow. That's what we want.